And Chris Emke.
And you're listening to the Diesel Performance Podcast. Guys, today we're going to be talking to an actual chemist.
Man, it's crazy to think about this, Paul. When we had Randy Harmecka from Exergy Performance on, and you were saying, man, I think it's crazy. There's no chemist that listened to us. And then come to find out a couple weeks later, a chemist from Australia, from the U.S. in Australia, reaches out and says, hey, I'm a chemist and I listen to you guys.
Yeah.
Go figure.
Blown away. So some smart people listen to us.
Yeah. Thank you, smart people.
Take that, my wife.
Yeah. And my boss.
Yeah.
You know what?
We're really excited to get you guys to that. Chris, this is going to be the last possible opportunity somebody has to save $100 on their EFI Live or EasyLink switch on the fly tuning. What trucks is that going to cover? Man,
I think it covers a wide range of vehicles that we do over at Calibrated Power. So if you have an 01 to 16 Duramax, if you have a 2013 to 2019 Ford, or if you have an 06 to 2021 Ram, we can get you covered and save you $100. So throughout the month of April, we're doing $100 off. If you have any questions, feel free to give us a call at the shop. We're more than happy to help.
Absolutely. Hey, guys, without any further ado, let's jump in and hear Chris and I talk to somebody smart, much smarter
than you. Yeah, for sure. Hit it.
Clinton Meyer, how the hell are you?
Doing well, Paul. How the hell are you?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for asking.
And that's the first time someone asked you back.
It's rare. We get one or two here and there. Yeah. Some people care.
Slick.
Some people care.
It's a Midwest thing.
There you go.
Clinton Meyer, of course, from the Midwest, currently located out there in Australia. But we wanted to talk to you today to get an insider kind of industry perspective.
Let's break this down.
Oh.
A month ago, you said that there are no chemists that listen to us on a show that we had with Randy Harmecka from Exergy. And here we are a month and a half later with Clinton Meyer, who is a freaking chemist. And he reached out to us on the podcast saying, hey, you do have someone that is knowledgeable and smarter than you that listens to you.
Well, yeah. Well,
that's
we have
wild.
a chemist. That's the part that was surprising. Smarter than me and listens to us is pretty much most of our listeners. But yeah. No.
He has the credentials.
That is totally correct. Yeah. So we have somebody who actually has that like real expertise, knowledge, and is not connected to any company as a part of this discussion. Just here to kind of educate us a little bit more about diesel fuel and the chemistry about how the science actually works that goes behind some of these diesel additives and different diesel fuel options out there. But of course, hey, with everybody, we start off the same way. Clinton, tell us, how did you get your start in diesel performance?
Yeah, thanks. I've been a huge fan of the show for a while, and I appreciate all the insight that you guys are providing, all the listeners, all of the fans of diesel performance. I got my start in diesel, I guess, coming off the background of my automotive background. My father had a workshop and a salvage yard for nearly 2 decades. And I wanted to be a bit different. There was that huge following of everyone LS swapping everything. And I was like, there's got to be something that can be done differently and still get great performance. And so I fell into the diesel crew of people running around. I had a couple friends who had, triple and twin turbo Cummins and Duramax stuff. But I ended up building an old 7.3. I ended up building 2 of them. I had a Mark IV Jetta and a Cruise as well. So I don't have a project at the moment, but I needed to get one, I guess.
I love that. Starting off with some real workhorses there. I mean, the 7.3, we all know.
Cringed.
There's a few people out there who have gone fast. I found out I can't say 7.3s can't go fast.
No, 7.3,
my word, they can.
7.3s could be you have the displacement there. Like
right.
you have the blueprint.
And a very few people have ever done it, and they're awesome for doing it.
And then there was you banging gears in your old
banging
OBS.
gears. Yeah, working it.
Yep.
unloaded 3 minutes a day of
But
driving.
then he said he had a TDI.
TDI, and then you perked up.
I'm about it.
Chris was like, all right, I'm back in. You son of a bitch.
Nice.
And then the cruise.
Yeah, I was running some of the older school stuff. Like my 7.3 built, I was almost at the stage 2 level across the board. My engine builder at Midwest Performance Diesel, it had me around the 550 horsepower mark, which was plenty for what I was doing.
Oh yeah.
That's a high water mark on those.
Hauling a triple axle gooseneck trailer and stuff. But yeah, I used to have all of that, and now I'm on the other side of the planet. Can't really take it with me, and everyone's driving on the wrong side of the road here.
Well, let's give our listeners a little bit of insight on that. How'd you go from a kid in a junkyard messing around with 7.3s to working in chemistry and knowing about diesel fuel and diesel fuel additives, working on the other side of the world?
Yeah, good question. So I got my start straight out of college, working for a automotive chemical company called BG Products. BG makes specialty fluids and chemicals. Basically anything that's liquid and goes in a vehicle, they make. So they make finished engine oils and gear oils and specialty products for all of the systems, all the liquid systems in vehicles. I started with them straight out of college because I had a passion for anything with an engine, but I graduated with degrees in chem and biochem, so I had to figure out how to put the two together, and that's how I came across them. And during my time with them, I got to be involved in the manufacturing process, a bit of research and development, also technical service. So they're a global company located in Wichita, Kansas, and I've been with them for about 7 years now. So they had an opportunity here in Australia, and I wasn't married and didn't have any extra, what would you call it, things holding me back, so to speak. So
Kids, they're called kids.
Oh, yes, those.
Jeez.
No, well, the opportunity arose, so just rose the challenge, and I'm out here helping out the Australian division. But working with BG has been an awesome experience. The people are great. I've got to go to the Detroit Auto Show as a rep for them. I've got to go to SEMA and Apex, the Society of Automotive Engineers World Congress, things that hold high marks in the manufacturing world for automotive and, in our case, diesel as well.
Yeah, and that's such a cool kind of story about, like, oh man, I grew up, like, you know, messing around with some of this, like, very budget conscious type of projects and things like that.
Well, depending on the year that he was working on it.
Yeah,
that was prime
truth.
time.
Truth. But then you start to progress, and as you start to get into your career and you're going around to places like SEMA and Apex and all of these other shows, you're also seeing the top end of where people have gone with diesel and the crazy things people are doing with diesel. As you start to talk about putting this chemistry together, I thought it'd be kind of a good idea to start with just diesel fuel in general. So when I buy diesel fuel from one gas station or another, from a chemist point of view, is there any difference? Like, I know we've talked about go to the same station all the time,
Yeah,
because you'll get more consistent results. Is that a myth? Is that just an old wives' tale, or is there an actual scientific difference in the quality of fuel?
Well, it definitely depends on who your fuel retailer is. Across the U.S., yeah, the quality can vary quite drastically, actually. And who their supplier is has a big impact on that. The state legislation also plays a role. For example, California, with all of their emissions legislation that they seem to lead the way with. They have a mandate for higher cetane requirements for all of their fuel. It's the highest requirement of all the states in the U.S. Texas has a high cetane requirement as well. It's not as high as California, but it's much higher than the minimum national standard, which is 40. So everyone has to meet the minimum in that regard for that particular aspect of the fuel, but it doesn't mean you can't do better.
Okay. So
Other aspects of the diesel fuel that we want to take into account are the bio content. For example, Minnesota, they mandate that you have to use B20. All of the retail sales for diesel make use of B20. And Washington, they mandated a B2. So all the diesel fuel in Washington has to be at least 2% bio. Things like that, I don't think many people actually know when they're going to the pump, filling up their fuel.
Well, let's be real. I'm not sure how great of a handle most people have on just what biodiesel is. Chris, if I say biodiesel, do you immediately think of French fry oil?
no, I think of part of it bio being recycled.
Okay. Well, like it is. I mean, French fry
Yeah.
oil, like it is recycled, right? But yeah, no. I always think of the guys who are talking about going and collecting all of the vegetable oil or French fry oil grease and whatever, cooking it down in their shed into biodiesel. But I do notice at the pump every time, because I do also, I'm a creature of habit. I go to the same two fuel stations, and I notice there is a difference in their rating of how much biodiesel is in there.
Can be, yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about what is biodiesel and the difference of 2% and 20%? Like, what does that mean to me as the consumer?
Well, Chris, you're onto it. Yeah, it's a portion of recycled material that we're finding a new use for. So, for example, a lot of soybean mash that's used for human consumption. About 80% of that mash gets used in food processing or has use because of the protein content. And then a lot of the leftover oil that has found a new use or a new course on life, being blended into the fuel.
Okay.
There's a couple of aspects why they do that. It helps with some greenhouse gas emissions. Bio content actually adds a lot of lubricity to the fuel, and it will help with costs as well. So yeah, there's a bit of recycling going on, but we've found a lot of positive outcomes without being too green, so to speak. Like I know we're all big fans of big engines and turbos, spinning up and rolling smoke down down the track at a big event. But for our everyday drivers, it's important that we find a good, healthy balance between energy and cost and recycling.
So, one of the questions you read about a lot, and I think some of this kind of pinpoints to some of the Bosch CP4 stuff. Okay, sure. And they talk about the U.S. grade of quality, the U.S. quality grade of fuel versus anywhere else in the country. What are the differences? Like, what am I seeing as far as what kind of diesel we use here in the U.S. or like here in Illinois, for example, versus diesel in Australia or New Zealand or in Europe or anything like that? What is that difference?
Oh yeah, I saw a couple of those technical service bulletins that come across where the pumps were failing in other parts of the world because of the low quality of fuel, and or the I think they're also linking it to the bit of lack of sulfur in the fuel that aids in lubricity as well. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the U.S. has great quality fuel. They're just second behind Europe in as far as the standards go. Australia has pretty low standards, and specifically in regard the quality of fuel standards in the U.S. are quite high because they're demanding additional requirements for lubricity. We're requiring additional cleanliness as far as what water content is allowed, what particle content is allowed, what's the cetane requirements, things of that nature. So the U.S. has quite good quality, quite good standards for diesel fuel. Here in Australia, it's it needs to be upgraded.
That's interesting. You know, Chris, I want to jump in here because I think one of the things that's easy to overlook is like when we first started digging into fuel additives, of course we had to talk about cetane. And I seem to remember when we were talking about cetane, the Reader's Digest version is more cetane is, if I remember this correctly, a little bit more power, and it'll help your fuel burn cleaner. So the higher cetane
so it has
rating,
a more efficient burn rating, more or less.
Can you help us out on this, Clinton?
Cetane is energy in the fuel, essentially.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. It's the quality of the ignition and quality of the burn, which is super important for our late model stuff, so that we keep soot content down. We don't want to be, overloading our DPFs. We don't want to be dumping a huge soot content load into our EGR systems.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes total sense to me. And then the biodiesel. What's the drawback? So you had mentioned like one state having 20% biodiesel content, another state having 2%. What's the
Minnesota,
problem?
Yeah, in Washington.
Yeah.
Well, everything's a trade-off. Especially in the chemical world, we're bound by the laws of thermodynamics. Just as you guys are as tuners, everything's a bit of a trade-off. There's only so much fuel you can add before you need more air, and vice versa.
Right.
So adding bio, some of the upsides are it can help with costs. It can help with tax purposes for the state. It can drastically improve lubricity. I think that's something that we ought to highly give some consideration to. I mean, just a 1% increase in bio content in the fuel can increase lubricity by about 30%.
Oh, wow.
Which I think is huge.
Yeah.
Now, in my opinion, from what I've seen in testing in the lab, we've on a regular basis, BG test fuel from across the nation, especially in the wintertime when everyone's worried about fuel gelling.
Right.
So it's important to know at what temperature the fuel is going to start gelling. And it changes across the nation depending on the supplier and, what's the water content of the fuel. There's a lot of factors that go into that. But looking at that data, anything like a B2 or a B5 is awesome for lubricity and fuel. And there's not much gain after you get above B5 for lubricity, as far as lubricity goes. So the benefit is better lubricity. The downside is potential issues, especially in the cold. Diesel or biodiesel tends to gel a bit easier. There's a bit of a energy content loss. So there's a little bit of like a fuel economy loss. But no one should be afraid of running bio in any of their vehicles, any of the late model as well.
Gotcha. And I it's funny there because like as I hear increased lubricity, I translate that to better longevity. Maybe it's not like a perfect equation, but like there's probably some sort of correlation between those two, right?
Yeah, correct. It's less load, less stress on our fuel system components.
I love
Absolutely.
that. But then if I hear, God, if you mutter the words
lose mileage,
all of a sudden guys are going to be running for the hills. Yeah. So like if I go 20% biodiesel, am I going to lose 20% of my fuel mileage?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
I mean, are we talking tenths.
I mean, you guys deal with that question all the time. People are probably calling you, "Hey, I need a tune for better fuel economy."
I'm
We
cringing now.
professionally dodge that question. Yes, that is
Yes.
correct.
Yes. Well, if you want good fuel economy, you should have bought a Prius. Okay. And we're not about that game.
No. I mean, you see those types of phone calls coming in, especially in the winter months. Right when, where we're at in Illinois, summer blend versus winter blend. So you have the fuel changing and then the temperatures dropping, and people can't wrap their head around. Temperatures are dropped. Vehicles are running at a lower temperature. It's taking longer to get the operating temp. The engine is not as efficient. That's where your mileage drop is more or less coming from.
Yeah.
So there's, they think that there's, a magic tune, or there's a magic fuel, and the temperature in which the engine operates under is a big deal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. And there's so many factors that we can't actively control because, the computer in the vehicle, it gets to have its say, whether it's consuming extra fuel to warm up and get the catalyst warm, or during the driving cycle, it gets to decide the fuel consumption. It has to do a passive regen. We don't get to have the ultimate say. And you're absolutely right. There's no magic tune that always increases fuel economy to a specific amount. There's no magic fuel or additive that always increases fuel economy to a specific amount. What we can do is just try to ensure that the system is operating as it's been engineered and deliver on the best power and performance that we can.
I like that. I think that's putting it really simply. We're going to take what we have. We're going to do the best we can with it, right? Okay, so I think we got a pretty clear handle on what impacts MPGs. I know definitely more about standard diesel fuel out of the pump, I think, than I did before we started this interview. So let's talk a little bit more about additives. Now, one of the things we've done, Chris, is we've talked to a lot of guys about the idea that you don't know what additives the fuel station is already put in there, right? So in the winter blend, right from Shell or whoever, they've already put in some sort of winter blend into their fuel, and then in summer, does that mean that they're just running no blend and they're putting no additives in it? I seriously doubt that. Can you talk a little bit about what that looks like from a supplier from a supplier standpoint? I don't know why I couldn't get that out.
Well, first I want to razz Chris a little bit because I think in a couple of episodes past he was very anti-additives. He was very potentially non-believer. That's snake oil type of stuff. Is that true?
Yeah. No, I've owned diesels for 12 years, and I have a very strong belief in how I operate all my vehicles. And, I don't plug them in. I don't run additive. I've never really ran into gelling issues. And then a couple of years ago, I did run into a gelling issue, come to find out that the fuel that I was getting from one particular station was watered down, and I had like a slushy in the bottom of my tank. Switched up fuel supplier, never had an issue since. But yes, that is a safe thing to say about me.
No, that's fine, and rightly so. There's a lot of people who run a similar approach. What I can say is that from refinery to pipeline to terminal and the logistics from even terminal to the pump there, additives are in use and protecting those systems as soon as it comes out of the refinery. So specific chemicals are used in specific areas for specific purposes, but all fuel that comes out of the refinery and out of the pump has some sort of additive in it. There's several different types of diesel fuel additives. I'll list a few. Corrosion inhibitors, detergents, dispersants, the cold flow improvers, cetane improvers. One that we may touch on later on is a new type of chemistry called an anti-wax settling agent. So we're going to keep and prevent wax from settling out in the fuel.
Got it.
I know a lot of people are familiar with antifungal or antibacterial additives to help keep the diesel bug away. The lubricity improvers, oxidation stabilizers, so we want to prevent the breakdown of the fuel, especially in storage. De-icing agents are a sort of a water control type of chemistry. It's important too that we have some chemicals in there to prevent foaming, especially with our high pressure fuel pumps. We're cranking up the pressure more and more as the technology advances. It's really important that we keep aeration down. During pipeline and logistical transport, it's important that we have a static dissipator in the fuel so we don't have any sort of static discharge. If you think about millions of gallons of fuel flowing through pipes and pumps, it can build up some static electricity, and we don't want it to discharge in any fashion.
Yeah.
And there's also some old technology that I get a lot of questions on, combustion catalysts or fuel-borne catalysts. Not many people are making use of that anymore because those types of chemicals and additives tend to poison catalysts.
Okay.
It is pretty crazy to think about, like, how many chemicals are poured into the fuel before we actually get any fuel in our tank.
So walk me through, right? You go to the store, you buy additives, right?
I think we're on the same question.
We're
here,
going
right?
into that, right?
It is like, okay, so if the OE has already put in all of this chemical into there, and they don't tell me what chemicals they are, how much there are, what the chemistry, like I'm literally just grabbing fuel and putting it in my vehicle.
Right.
What's the point of ever buying another additive? They've already added everything I need to it, right?
And then some.
Well, we have to also understand that the fuel business is a business. It's not a charity. They need to make money at the end of the day. So they have a minimum standard that they have to meet in order to sell the fuel to the public. That minimum standard isn't necessarily high. I think it's actually quite lacking compared to how quickly the technology is advancing in our modern day vehicles. So if you have the opportunity to improve the quality of the fuel above the minimum standard for your state or your region, and you rely on that vehicle for your livelihood, or it's a proper investment for you, it's worth it every day. I mean, what's that old saying? You put good in, good out. It's the same for the fuel for your diesel truck.
I like that. Okay. If I'm an uneducated...
If I'm Paul Wilson.
Well played. Yeah, if I'm me, and I'm rolling up, there's two gas stations next to each other. I don't really know which one is better.
Dude, in town, two gas stations right down the street.
One has
apart.
a lot of advertisements saying that they're better.
Mm-hmm.
So I go there. I've put it in my vehicle. My vehicle runs fine.
Yeah.
But then I'm like, I'm in the shelf. I'm inside and I'm looking at the shelf, and they got a bunch of different fuel additive. And there's one that just says all around best additive for diesel. And I grab it and I go pour it in my truck, and I'm good. And like the truck runs, it drives, it gets. I didn't lose any fuel mileage. Shopping done, right? Experiment over.
Well, Paul, I'd say doing something is better than doing nothing, even if the doing something part is a bit of a placebo for yourself. As far as like fuel quality, like which station to go to, you've probably seen at a station it lists top tier gasoline.
Yeah.
Have you seen that before? Top tier.
I don't know about the words top tier. They all say a bunch of shit at them, right? How about all the ones they all have little TV screens at the gas pump now. Like I have no idea what any words say anywhere. I don't read anything.
Well, So there's a program in place called Top Tier, and it started with gasoline. It's now since 2017 they have included a diesel as part of their program. So it actually requires that fuel retailer to have a slightly improved minimum standard to sell their fuel above the national standard. So if you come across or you locate a service station that sells top tier fuel, you have increased performance of the fuel quality because they're mandated by their top tier specification.
Wow,
So hopefully that helps give you some confidence or some insight on, okay, is my fuel retailer a top tier retailer? It's a small improvement, but it's better than the bare minimum.
look at us digging
as
out some practical
Yeah.
consumer advice for you guys. Wow. We
You're
did
going to
it.
use that, Paul.
Well, I'm going to take credit for it.
Yeah,
I mean,
there
it
you go.
doesn't matter if Clinton's
sure.
the one who told us about it.
No.
I learned it.
Heard
now.
it here first.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Clinton,
as
this
far
is
as like the stuff you get off the shelf, brother, there's unfortunately there's a lot of stuff on the market that doesn't deliver. I mean, things might say improves fuel economy or cleans injectors and things like that. What I would look for in a product is um, do some of your homework first. I always encourage that. Do some homework. Does the product have any credentials from any OEM manufacturers? You know, has this company done any work with them? Do they have any credentials for quality of manufacturing? You know, we would rather have something in my truck that, you know, is what it says it is from the manufacturing side and the quality is consistent. I personally, I don't want anything manufactured in China, but that's just me.
I like that. Yeah, or see if it has Exergy Performance's name on it, because that's definitely a name that you can trust when it comes to your fuel additive.
What a plug.
I mean, if you guys are gonna softball them up to me like that, you know.
I like it.
Well,
Clinton,
speaking of Exergies, I have an interesting question for you guys. You're really touting the lubricity additive in the Exergy product. Um, so we can dig a little bit deep into like some of the chemistry for lubricity additives and chemicals. There's two main types of lubricity enhancers. The first one is what we would call a fatty acid or a monoacid. So I'm not going to dig too deep into the chemistry so you guys don't get too lost, but the first type we'll call a monoacid. And it's really basic chemistry, but as the name implies, it is an acid. So we get great improvement in lubricity by using this type of chemical up to a point. So like with any additives, whether you get them off the shelf or it's coming in the fuel out of the pump, more does not always equal better. So I know there's people who say, oh, well, I put 3 bottles of this, and if you look on the bottle, it says, you know, only add 1. It's a bit wasteful. But fatty acid and monoacid technology, they're quite naturally occurring. They're very cost effective. The downside, like we're talking about, there's always a trade-off. The downside is that because they are an acid, they can react with some of the other chemicals in the fuel or cause some premature fuel breakdown. A lot of really fine filter material. So if you guys are running, you know, 5 or I want to say 2 to 5 micron filtration in your fuel system, you might have some premature blocking. There's some potential for that using the monoacid technology. It doesn't take very much of this type of additive to achieve great lubricity, but the end performance is a bit limited. So there's not as much synergy between other chemicals with it.
Did you
The
just
other
say
type
synergy
is-
on this show?
Yeah, synergy. So
Are we
different
gonna let that
additives,
fly, Chris? Yep. Okay, Chris
different additives
approved
will
it.
work together.
I'm just giving you a hard time. We love the word synergy here. Okay.
Oh yeah.
So let me rope some of this back in for the dum-dums like me out there. Just because you have a ton of lubricity doesn't mean it's the best. Same as anything else, right? So like we're not in like a drinking tequila kind of suggestion here. More is not always better.
No, and the quality of the chemical matters as well. So, you could have a case of Natty Light or a bottle of Crown Royal. They both say alcohol in the bottle, but the quality and the quantity of the active chemistry, which would be the alcohol in them, is vastly different. And oftentimes, I'm sure as you guys see this on your side of the industry, what you get what you pay for.
Truth.
Yeah.
And now we also finally nailed an analogy that everybody who listens to our show can understand. Do you want gross dishwater beer or good whiskey? I like that.
Yes.
There you go.
I like that. All right. Man, we have talked about a lot today, and I feel like this is one of those good, really highly technical contents that guys are going to love. There's probably a bunch of stuff that I haven't been able to ask or we're not going to be able to dive into today. If anybody wanted to reach out and post a message on our Fans of Diesel Performance podcast Facebook group, I didn't even write that name down, and I got it right today,
You
Chris.
didn't even stumble.
So if you want to go there,
Process.
that is where Clinton actually reached out to me. That is where you guys can, I think, also post some questions. Clinton, would you be willing to go on and answer some questions around this topic for people in our public Facebook group?
Yeah, I can definitely help out. It's all part of being in this community of diesel fans. I mean, I don't know a lick about tuning. I mean, that's why I would reach out to you guys for any questions I have about tuning and remapping and stuff. That's not my area, but this is, as far as the chemicals and fuel quality go, I'm more than happy to help out anybody.
I love it. Well, thank you so much. Every once in a while, Chris, we have fans reach out and they want to be on the show. And sometimes I'll talk to them and be like, hey, what do you want to talk about? We find out, it's, I have this truck build that I want to dig into, or, hey, I have a great personal story. And I love getting fans on the show. When we have fans who turn out to be experts, I always get super excited.
It's one of those ironic things because, me, right, as a person, I get a lot of guys that call into the shop and like, hey, listen to you on the podcast. We really appreciate it. Everything's super informative. I listen to the podcast when I'm traveling or working, whatever, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there thinking like, well, I'm just an average person. I like doing what I do. I'm very passionate about it. And I don't realize sometimes how much information I retain just from working where I work, my profession.
Yeah.
When I can have a podcast, when I can be on a podcast and do an interview with someone and he can teach me something and I'm like drawn to that, I'm mind blown because now I know what our listeners deal with on a daily basis.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it is a lot of fun. And hey, guys, Clinton reached out to us through Fans of Diesel Performance podcast Facebook
we preach
group.
it all the time, and there you go.
So if you want to be in a group on Facebook that has a lot of really smart people talking about diesel stuff, that's a great place to go.
And he even offered he would chime in.
That's
if
right.
a listener is interested in asking more questions about additives and fuel in general.
That's right. So if you have chemistry questions, or if your kids have chemistry questions and you can't help them, boom. Diesel
Do not
Performance
ask Paul or
Podcast
I.
is here to help.
Do not ask Paul or I. Above our pay grade.
Right. Well, yeah, for sure. Guys, if you have suggestions, comments, feedback for us, iTunes is a great place for it. You write anything you want. Just make sure that you label it with a 5-star. I only read the 5-star ones. So,
wow.
So if you want to contact me, the best place to do it is in iTunes.
Only in 5-star
podcast reviews, and I will read all of the 5-star ones, no problem.
Wow, that's slick. You could tell. You have that car salesman blood mentality.
I might have in a past
sold
life.
a couple.
Right.
One
time. All right,
couple
guys.
Chevy Volts.
Thank you so much for listening today. This has been Paul Wilson
and Chris Emke.
Smarter than
Yeah.
me and listens to us is pretty much most of our listeners. But
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.